One of the wonderful things, and also one of the biggest issues that we have, is that Frank and I have grown this company organically. I've been out in the field and I've done field work. I went to school for AutoCAD. I've done drafting. I've done elevation certificates out in the field. Like, there's not really any part of, well, the engineering part. I'm not there. But there's really not anything that goes on in the company that I don't understand firsthand, because I did that. I've been there. Typing up the legal descriptions, basic things like that. When you start like that and then you grow the business, the wonderful thing is you understand what all of your employees are going through, no matter what their position is, because you've been in their shoes at one point or another. So it really makes a big difference, because when they're talking to me, I understand what they're talking about. And if a field crew comes in and they're talking about, it's 110 degrees today, and I didn't get all my jobs done. I thought I was going to pass out. I get that. I understand what they're talking about. The biggest problem with that is trying to disconnect myself from all of that and focus on the bigger picture. Because when you grow it organically, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, it's your baby.
Yeah.
It's your baby.
Yeah.
And as it gets larger and larger, you can't do all phases of that baby. You can't take care of all phases of that baby. So you bring somebody on that's supposed to, help you run the company. And are you supposed to just put out your arms and say, here's my baby, take it? It's very difficult.
It's a process to do that, right?
It's
not a light switch.
You get the shakes sometimes.
Yeah, we've been there.
We got to take that step backwards, and we kind of do it every year with our business. We look at it and say, all right, how can we improve? What can we do moving forward to build the company? And then what do we have to take away so that we can actually accomplish that? So it's, reflection, I think, and then, having the culture, building the people up so that you can kind of grow with, from within. You should be able to trust somebody that's been with you for 4 years to maybe take a step up and be able to take things over.
I don't know if it's not the trusting of it. I think it's the letting go.
Yeah.
Like it's just like I have fabulous employees. I really do. We're so fortunate that we have like you said, it's family, and that's how we feel there. But it's that letting go. It's the letting go, because can anybody do it just as good as you can do it?
Right.
Yes, they can. But are you going to give them the opportunity to do that? And that becomes one of the more difficult things.
And Jocko Willink talks. Do you know who Jocko Willink is? He's a Navy SEAL commander. He trains other Navy SEALs, and he was in Iraq. He had the most successful missions in Navy SEAL history, and he's talking about leadership because he's growing and training leaders. And we were out with his team in California, and they're talking about. So I'm sitting here with like 3 Navy SEAL instructors that are teaching other Navy SEALs how to be SEALs, and one of the guys was a Top Gun flight instructor. So we're sitting here with some bad dudes talking about leadership, and one thing that I really took away was they're not going to do it like you, right? They're not. It's not going to be 100%. But you know what the Navy SEALs say? If it's 80% and they've adopted it and it's their baby now, then that's okay. And to get to a certain point where you can really be... So what he says is, to be in control of everything, you have to be in control of nothing. So to be able to look at your team and say, all right, so Abe, you're going to take this. It's your baby, right? Because when do you have more buy-in? When Steven says, hey, this is exactly how you do it, and you kind of disagree, right? Or when you say, all right, Steve, I hear what you're saying. I'm going to do it like this, though. And I'm like, well, that's 80%. But you're going to have 100% ownership of that 80%, right? Or 50% ownership of my 100%. So it becomes this kind of dichotomy of, can I lead? Can I get them to effectively do their job? And does it do what I need it to do for the company, even though it's not perfect? And that is really tough. I think for all of us as business owners, that is a really hard thing to get through. But hearing Navy SEALs tell me that that's how I have to do it made me feel a lot better about it, at least, right? Because
that's growing pains, I think. So they do have to experience some failure, and you are going to have to take them along and teach them and continue to train them. You won't have to let go of the baby, necessarily. all together, but eventually over time, 2 years, 3 years, you'll look back and you'll say, okay, cool, because allowing yourself to free yourself up to continue to build new things and look to the future, that's where you need to take your company. And that's why kind of we reflect every year. If you don't do that, then you get stuck in the past, and then people leave because they don't have the responsibility, then they're not growing. It's a vicious cycle, I think, so.
And I read the book Jack Welch, Straight from the Gut. So he ran GE for a number of years. He built it to be the strong company that it is today. He created GE Capital through his years and tenure as CEO. And I always looked up to him as a mentor just because how do you build a company that's that big? I mean, GE is one of the biggest companies in the world. And they're in everything, right? They're in aerospace engineering. They're creating turbines. They're creating washers and dryers, right? They had a GE appliance. And then they're doing capital markets too. So they're deploying equity into real estate transactions like I do. So I'm like, how can you be the head of a company like that? You can't know everything.
Yeah.
Right? So reading his book and talking about how he's hiring for culture and training for capability was really helpful for me too in terms of growing the business and saying, all right, so he knows that he can't be the expert in aeronautical engineering and dryers. He just can't be. Or plastics, right? GE does plastics too. So it's like, if you can't be the expert in all of these things, how do you effectively manage and grow a successful company that is an expert in all of these things? And so so that book, Jack Welch, Straight from the Gut, great read on how to be a leader without having to be the expert. So it really took me out of my comfort zone too. So it's interesting to see how some of the greatest leaders don't really know anything about what they're leading. It's predicated on relationship and culture. So
absolutely
interesting.
So we're obviously you got I know Morgan Engineering, especially over the last few years. I mean, they've gone through some pretty explosive growth. You guys acquired some large engineering firms, and what was that like? With taking on, I think you had some transitional where some of those people stayed on but weren't part of your culture, and so how did that feel with that growing and taking on those companies and expanding the Morgan Engineering footprint?
That's a good question. We started out by just buying up companies that maybe they were getting ready to retire, and we wanted their phone number, their website, their records, and things like that. And that was pretty easy. You take all their records. There's a lot of scanning and indexing involved, but it just helps because then you have more control over the different areas that you're working in if you have older records. So that made a lot of sense. And then we decided, okay, now there's opportunities. There were a couple of companies that we were actually bringing the whole company on board, buying out the company, interviewing the employees, taking them on, bringing on the prior owner. And that was a challenge. That was definitely a challenge because if you take somebody who ran their own company for the past 23, 25 years, and they were the person in charge, and then all of a sudden now they're an employee. And that whole transition and how to make them a part of your team when it was always their way. Now then there's the Morgan way. And trying to merge the two of them was a challenge. I think sometimes it still is. But I think that giving people their own space and taking what they are really good at and letting them focus at that, you just find their strengths. I think that's what we try and do with all of our employees is just find their strengths, because some people, you put them in one position and you think they're going to be fabulous at it or, really blossom in it, and then you realize that this is not a good fit for them. It doesn't mean that